We said, Borky asked the question, okay, let's explore what the most interesting team, we asked Andy Staples about it, most interesting team in college football is. Not the team you think is going to win the most, not the team that's a favorite to win the national champion, the team that's got the most storylines. And I said, I don't think we can narrow it to one. I had three in my mind. Andy Staples went with one of those. I know you guys have been kicking it around as well. I'll give you mine to start. I agree on Southern Cal. Southern Cal is a team we talked about yesterday in our countdown of 100 teams in 100 days, who I think's got a really high floor. I mean, I think their floor is 7 or 8 wins based on the schedule they've got. Now, granted, that's a team that won only 4 games a year ago. I think with the schedule, unless it's a complete train wreck, their floor is 7.5. I think their ceiling is 10. Maybe you convince me it's at 11. But I don't think they're going to beat Utah. I really don't think they're going to beat Notre Dame. They may drop one more in there. I think this is a team that's going to be 8-4, 9-3. But with the Biletnikoff winner transferring in and Jordan Addison, who's so much fun to watch, with all that Caleb Williams does well, with the history that we have of Lincoln Riley offenses putting points on the board, Southern Cal is going to be fun to watch. I think they're going to score a bunch of points. I just don't think the defense is good enough that they're going to stop other people. And so their games are going to be track meets. At least that's my prediction going into the year. And I think that makes them a really fascinating story. Team number 2 on my most interesting teams. And by the way, the Tennessee, that was a good one. It's just not the team in the SEC I picked. Arkansas is really interesting to me. KJ Jefferson does a lot of things well. Arkansas's schedule has got some challenge on it. It really does. That Cincinnati game right out of the gate is so intriguing in week 1. I know everybody's saying Arkansas wins it. Cincinnati lost a lot. I'm not sure it's the slam dunk. And then they've got South Carolina in week 2, and then Missouri State, and then A&M, and then Bama. I mean, and they go to BYU. It's a hard schedule for Arkansas this year. I'm fascinated by what they do in terms of trying to replace Treylon Burks. I love Bumper Pool. Love Catalon. Jalen Catalon, kind of a guy that can do it all on the back end of that defense. I really like Sam Pittman. I think Arkansas is a really fascinating team. And then the third for me is a team that's in the Big Ten, and it's because of all the other stuff. It's Nebraska. One of the most passionate fan bases who desperately wants to recapture their glory days. Probably not ever going to happen. But is this Scott Frost thing going to work? Because we've got examples of Scott Frost's offenses working at UCF, at Oregon. And they got better offensively last year. But Adrian Martinez is out. A new quarterback in. Stakes are really, really high. The pressure's going to be high. We're going to see them in Ireland to start the season. The way that Pat Fitzgerald's approaching that trip in comparison to the way Scott Frost is approaching that trip. One obviously facing a lot of pressure. The one, he could probably be the president of the university if he wanted to. Talking about obviously Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. Is this going to be the year that Scott Frost wins some support among Nebraska fans and steadies the ship and gets them moving in the direction they think they want to go? Or is this the end of the line for Scott Frost? That makes Nebraska a really interesting team. Because I'm not sure there's an in-between for Nebraska. I think Nebraska and Scott Frost need to win 9 games if he's going to be the head coach there next year.
And what did they lose? 7 one-score games last year? 7 or 8 one-score games last year?
Yeah.
So something ridiculous, yeah.
They were on the cusp.
3-9 with and so close to being like 8-4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are my 3 most interesting teams in college. Not most interesting. 3 teams that I'm watching that I think are must-watch TV when they take the field this year. Who's up?
I'll go. Aha! Beat you.
Well, okay then.
Shotgun.
I'm going to do a 2 for 1, and then I'll turn it to Hey Dad, then I'll do my last one. Miami and Clemson. I can't help but think that if Clemson has another down year with how Miami is acquiring talent, you've got a situation in the ACC where two ships are passing quietly in the night. Tyler Van Dyke is a name that a lot of you probably don't know. He's Miami's quarterback, didn't start the season as the starter. I'll start with their game in October against NC State. Threw for 325 on 76% completions, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Beat Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh the next week, 426, 76% completions, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Beat Georgia Tech, 389, 3 touchdowns, 316 against Florida State, 4 touchdowns, 357 against Virginia Tech, 3 touchdowns, 381 against Miami, 3 touchdowns. The kid is a star. We're up against a hard break, but Miami may not be ready yet. But there's a game in November at Clemson where I think you might see a passing.
Okay. We'll come back to this right after a quick timeout. Sports interesting teams in college football. I gave you Southern Cal, Nebraska, and Arkansas as my 3. Michael Borky was in the process of talking about Miami and Clemson, 2 teams in the ACC that have got pretty good storylines going. And he pointed to a game in November when those 2 teams meet each other. Are you predicting that Miami is going to pass Clemson?
Maybe not on the field in that game. In Miami's, they don't have the easiest schedule in the world. They're going to Texas A&M. They obviously have to go to Clemson. They will play Pittsburgh. It's not easy, but with the way they're recruiting and what they have returning, people are really underselling what this team could currently be. And on the flip side, Clemson, DJ Uiagalelei was an atrocity last year. I mean, let's be honest. He was so hyped, and he was horrid. And Dabo, for the first time, lost his guy on the other side of the ball. Clemson's defense was great last year. That's why they won 9 games in the regular season, was because they played great defense. Venables...
I was just saying, let me add numbers for context when you say that, because my initial thought was, are you overstating what you said about DJ Uiagalelei? And the answer is no. He completed 55.6% of his passes, which is a really small number in today's college football game, for 2,246 yards with 9 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Those are not numbers for an elite starting quarterback at a powerhouse in college football.
And that's what he was hyped up to be. Remember, even while he was playing so bad and at one point got sat, he was on the Dr. Pepper commercials on the national broadcast. I mean, he had all this hype and didn't match it. So he's got to be dramatically better. And now we've got to figure out what Dabo's going to be like without a guy in Brent Venables that you could just that's your defense. You handle it. I'm good. And he was great at it, and he's now gone. And Clemson doesn't have the easiest road either. I mean, they have to go to Wake Forest. Hartman's back. NC State's been better, although that's in Clemson. They're at Florida State. They're at Notre Dame. This could be one of those situations where this powerhouse that they have been, you're allowed to have a down year. But what happens if they have another one? What happens if DJ doesn't get better? What happens if defensively you're not as good without your rock that you've had for so long, and you're going to get out-recruited by Miami? 2 ships, possibly this season, passing quietly past each other in the night.
And by the way, that down year last year for Clemson was 10 wins.
It's still 10 wins. It's remarkable. But
it was 10 wins. They lost to Georgia. They beat South Carolina State. Low-scoring, ugly win against Georgia Tech. Lost in double overtime to NC State. Beat Boston College and Syracuse. Lost to Pittsburgh. Relatively low-scoring. And then they won 6 in a row, including the bowl game against Iowa State to close out the year. So they went from 4-3 to 10-3.
A lot of great defense played on those.
Yep. You're right. All right. So those are 2 good ones, right? New coach in Miami, new attitude, new commitment to the program across the board. One of the teams that has absolutely had staying power at the top of college football for the last decade. Maybe trending down a little bit. What's that season going to like? I like it. Miami and Clemson for Michael Borky. Ryan Haydad, who you got?
I also have Miami. I think they're very interesting with Cristobal there, and it seems like they're making that concerted effort to at least establish the culture whether you liked it or not, of the 80s and 90s Hurricanes there. They're trying to bring that back. I have Miami beating Texas A&M in Week 4. I think they're going to get that win in College Station. I just got a feeling that they're coming to win that game. So we've talked enough about Miami. I mean, it's an every year thing, right? But, I mean, aren't you at least a little bit interested in what's going to happen at Texas? A couple years away from the SEC move. Quinn Ewers comes from Ohio State to Texas. You know, everybody's already hyping him up. Arch Manning is coming in behind him. I think there's a lot of great storylines for Texas this year. They have a great running back in Bijan Robinson. Sarkisian in year 2. It looked like he was going to get off to a great start there, and then they just collapsed last season. I mean, this is Texas. If he doesn't win 9 games, he's on the hot seat next year. No question about it. That's how Texas works. So he's got to be a 9-win coach this year. And I don't know if they've got what it takes to do that, to be totally honest with you. I mean, they're going to lose to Alabama. They're going to lose to Oklahoma. There's 2.
How much does – well, I'm not necessarily chalking up the Oklahoma. I mean, even if Texas is not great, they seem to play well in that game. Mm-hmm. How much does what the game against Alabama looks like in Week 2 either build up or deflate the ego of Texas football Inc.?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if they're close in that game, we are just going to hear – I mean, that's going to be all we hear is, oh, they're back, they're back. Even if it's close, I want Alabama, and we need Alabama for our own sanity to go over there and win by 40. That's just what we need to have happen. So,
or they win that game and then lose to Texas San Antonio the next week.
Even better. That would be exciting. My third team is in the SEC, and maybe y'all will laugh a little bit, but how does the hunt, now that the hunted or the hunter has become the hunted, Georgia, 42 years without a national title.
41.
Now they're the defending national champions. Stetson Bennett is back, but nobody wants him there. They lost a lot off that defense. They still have a lot of great talent, though. They've recruited well. They could be record-wise just as good as they were a year ago and be a much worse football team. If they get past this Oregon game, they don't really have another team that challenges them on the schedule. Auburn and Florida aren't ready to do that. Kentucky is probably their toughest game remaining, and you would think they'd win that, relatively comfortably.
November 19th what is their in Lexington.
Going to be an interesting game. So how do they react as the defending national champions after being, on the outside looking in for so long? I'm interested to see that.
Kentucky does not play a home SEC game until October 8th. That's crazy. They've got 2 home SEC games in October and 2 in November, and that's it. So it's a weird schedule set up this year for Kentucky. See, I think Kentucky's another team that deserves to be in the conversation.
Yeah. Kentucky could be – I always like to talk about bad good teams and good bad teams. Kentucky could be a great bad good team. Like a team you feel like you should beat them.
A great bad good team?
Yes, they could be a top of the line bad good team. A team that you're just we should beat them. They're not that talented. Levis is overrated. And then you look up and you lost by 10. And they just grinded you to death. Ground you, I guess would be the better way to say that. They ground you to death with the running game and defensively, and they just won an ugly, ugly football game. And you look up at the end of the season, they're 9-3.
For our purposes, don't we want Kentucky to beat Florida in Week 2?
Yes.
To set up a pair of undefeateds on October 1st in Oxford with Kentucky and Ole Miss.
That's what we want, yes.
And I keep